Ready? Hello, Seattle Indies. Hello, Deepan. How everybody's doing tonight? Okay, low examine tonight then. So today I'm going to talk about choosing the game tasks that matter the most for your game jam. My name is Toño Jimenez. So why is important to who am I and why I'm speaking? So I'm a Deepan alumni. I graduated back in 2014, and I have been an adjunct instructor on and off for the last 3-4 years. I also got project management certifications in the project management professional, the Scrum Master, the product owner professional, and also I'm an agile facilitator. I have worked on games like Pokemon Go, Halo Infinite, Ark Survival Evolved, and Minecraft, among others. And right now I have my own consultancy on which I try to help games be done in the most effective way possible. So with that, let's get started. So games are unique in the way that it combines science on the way that it's math heavy. You need physics, you need collisions, you need math, engineering architecture in order to do things the most efficient way, keeping those 60 to 120 frames per second. It's also art because it's a form of expression. It's a way on which we communicate or send a message to people either through storytelling, through music, and an active medium as well. But it's also a business on the sense that most people that are actually in the game industry, we want to live out of what we do, in the sense that we are not doing game for fun. We actually want to live out of this, being able to eat, being able to have shelter, afford what we do. So that's why tonight I'm going to be talking about the Iron Triangle, known in project management, because on every project we have a limited amount of scope, we have a timeline that we want to deliver things, and we have a budget or money, or in most cases, we talk about talent because that's the important part. Because it doesn't matter how much money you have, if you don't have the person that is able to do that special type of skill, you're unable to do whatever you need to do to get your game done. And usually these are really straightforward concept, but us as game developers, we have the bad habit that once things were doing well, we add it will be a nice if, or what will be a great idea, or you know what we should add to the game. So that's why one of the things I usually tell people is that the scope of your game will always tend to be infinite, because the more you're working on your game, the more it will feel like, oh, we can just add this new thing or we can add this other thing. But if we keep adding stuff and not contemplating or adjusting the time or amount of people that we're having here, we won't be able to finish the game or chip. Right now, we have a problem that we have a lot of games on endless development that is taking 6, 7, 8 years. And as last year proved, 2025, a lot of games just got canceled mid-development because of that, because there's no clear roadmap on where things are going to be launched. So right now we have the advantage that we're doing this thing called the Global Game Jam, that you have a really nice constraint that is you need to do something within 48 hours. And if you don't do it, it sucks. You're unable to do anything more. So for this is critical that early from the get-go, you decide as a team what are the most important things that you should be working in order to deliver the best game that you're able to do with you and your team. So for that is why tonight we're going to do a small exercise on which we're going to determine across, I think it's 15 to 20 people in the room, will help me choose what will be the task that needs to be done first to last. And we're just running a simulation that we're right now just sitting for the first time deciding the game. We have already chose the game, the mechanics. So let's say that we have this small game project. And because it's a global game jam, we need to have an intro screen that has the global game jam logo and your team logo. You want a main menu. You want to have your settings and your credits. And of course, we need gameplay. So we need to at least have one level. We're going to have one simple enemy character. We want two bosses. We're ambitious that way because we like paint, and we need to have a playable character, and that playable character should have 2 skills. So this is our new fake action RPG that we're going to do, but we need to decide what tasks we should be doing first or what we should be prioritizing. So because of that, we're going to do this small exercise. So first of all, this is unscripted. Everybody will help me decide this. Usually we do this with 5 to 10 people that are the main stakeholders. But in this case, we'll do it with all of you are going to help me prioritize this list I just showed you. And since we want everybody's voice to be heard, this is not the loudest voice will win. This is people will raise their hand and will choose the priority. So with that, let me remove the first. So, and our first task is a playable character skill 1. So we put this in the middle saying, okay, this is what are we going to do. Now we have playable skill 2. Is this going to be more important or less important than skill 1? Raise your hand if it's the most is more important skill 2 than skill 1. Yes?
That's the game we're building, so we can decide
priorities of the other. EOS a random action RPG. So the second skill will be less important than the first skill. Okay, I see a couple of hands, so it's less important. We're going to put it here. Yes?
Is that a link I can get to be able to show on the screen?
No. I didn't thought about that. Sorry. I will send you a recording of this. Now we have boss 2. So boss number 2 will be more or less important than skill number 1. So more important, raise your hand. Less important? Okay. Is boss number 2 more or less important than our second skill? More important? Less important? Okay, it will be less important. Having the credits is more or less important than our second skill? More important? Less important? Okay. Less important than our second boss? More important? Yeah, let's go for here. And now let's grab this and shift. So our intro screen, that will be more important or less important than our second boss? More important? Less? Okay. More important than our second skill? Less? Okay. So we put it here in the middle. Now let's say that we continue this activity. I'm just going to throw this for summary. And then we arrive to this point on which we have now several on the screen. And here's the secret. We always try to aim for the middle of each task as you have been seeing. So in this case, the settings will be more or less important than our settings. Skill 2 is more or less important than the settings. Settings is more important? Less important? Okay, so we jump in the middle. So now we check with our second boss. The boss number 2 and settings. Settings is more important than boss number 2? Less important? Okay, so we jump. I will try to make 2 jumps here. Playable character is more or less important than our settings? More important? Less important? Okay, so settings is less important. And this is how we prioritize our list. This is a good example. This is called a Vision Board 2020, on which we have determined the task, and with the entire room participating, we have chosen what will be the most important aspects for this. Now back to the presentation. So basically, that was our activity. For several indies in the Global Game Jam, I have decided to actually help you and mentor. So anybody that wants to reach out to me and they need help, there's the QR code on screen and also on the slide deck, and you can scan it. And you will schedule time with me, and I will be more than happy. I will be here at DigiPen Friday evening, Saturday evening, afternoon and evening, and Sunday morning, afternoon. I'm more than happy to help you either with this activity, other project management or production problems that you may have. And I'm also a programmer for the last 18 years. So if you have a bug or architecture problem that you do not know how to solve, I'm more than happy to help you. I love programming. I'm good at math and good with game AI. And thank you so much. Also, I do this as a service. So for anybody that's listening, that if you want me to do this activity with your professional game team or things to determine what's the most important aspect for your game project, please scan this QR code and I will be more than happy to help you. Thank you. Any questions? Yes? Oh, yes?
I did that exercise by vote, but what would you recommend what would you put as the first task if you had to put one?
Well, the thing is, for me, since I'm the one helping, I'm not the one choosing the task. Usually, I decide that as a group because you want the voice of your team to be heard. Usually, the way I do it is whenever I put this in a board, like or either on a mirror like I did, or I do it in a normal board with post-its. I I like the post-its because I just grab them, shuffle them, and I just put it at random. The order do not matter. The agreement of what we should do first is the thing that matter. Like everybody's voice is heard. That's why I did by raising hands instead of voice, because with voice you will have a couple of people in the room being the loudest, and those are the people that win. But it's like, well, that will not work because we have 20 people. I want everybody's opinion to be heard, and if somebody uh, objects on that, it's more like, well, you got overwritten by your entire team at that point. But at the very least, we have a majority room temperature knowledge. Any other question? Well, thank you so much. Rob, I think it's your time.
many game jams, somewhere on the range like 15. I'm not sure. But yeah, I'm also a professional game developer. I am actually a technical artist, so deals with things like art, programming, modeling, shaders, as well as things like project management and coordination. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. I'll be happy to talk to you about that. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about using Unity in game jams, although a lot of the advice I'm going to give you is not specific to Unity. It's actually just for game jams in general. One important note to remember, the idea of a game jam is you're trying to build a game in basically a weekend. Spoiler alert, you're not going to build Skyrim in a weekend. Not to break anyone's hopes and dreams on that. I know, sorry, Tim. But you can get a lot done if you actually kind of plan things accordingly and you kind of have a realistic scope. Gonna point out here, I've got here an example from a project due to a slight oversight. But I'm not going to name names on who made that mistake, but their name will show up in this. Anyways, to give a general overview on this game, you are playing as a little character inside this little container that wakes up from cryo sleep and has to sneak through a little space of robots to kind of escape this little place you're enclosed in. The game itself was built in a game jam. Trying to remember what year that was. I think it might have been 2018 maybe, although I updated some of these versions. For this project, we really had about 5 people on the project. We'll zoom in. Conveniently, everything is actually in the world space, including our credits over here. So we did have in a moment where we actually had a light go out in the facility we're in, and we had Daniel Rother, who was one of the people managing there during the game jam, came over and helped replace the light. So as a little Easter egg, we threw him into our credits as the real-time lighting technician. So, but basically on this, we had Terrence Tolman, myself, Ray Soyama, Max Sandler, and Terry DeWin. Note, all these people that worked on this game, 4 at the time and then 5 later, became professional game developers. If not, they weren't before us. 4 of us already were. You can get a lot done just kind of playing things ahead. And we had a very narrow scope. We had basically the character controller. We needed animations for that. It was just simple animations of walking and getting caught. And we had at one point an uppercut where you could kind of break the robots. That got cut. And so like when you were in the middle of development and realizing, hey, we don't got time to implement this, cut it right then. Don't drag it out. Just kind of when you realize that, hey, this isn't going to work for the time we have left, get rid of it. For the actual robots themselves, if I can remember what they're called in this project. And is this, I think they show up on play. All the fun old equipment. Yeah. Here's a little robot. There are some broken textures. The magenta color is a missing texture. Similarly, our character model animations are corrupted in this file. But we have little robots. That's all they're doing. They fly around until they actually detect that there's motion in an area, and then they change their flight path to kind of move over to where the player is. And when they're close enough, the player gets caught and they're sent back to the start. It's a very simple game loop. You just kind of go around sneaking. We have sort of a wall creep you can do on the animations. And then the enemy behavior is just kind of set around using flight paths. It'll be fun with the actual things in motion. I don't remember if I made these clickable or not. Yes, there you go. So for your games, you really want to limit your risk on the games that you're going to build. If you have some sort of really technical dependency for the game to work the way you imagine it, keep that one and try and like hold the others as like you might not get to them. Because this is basically using a Bezier curve flight path generator that I wrote over the weekend for this. If that didn't work, we would have had to change the entire way the robots worked. So you actually see the actual eye cone for the robot. There's 2 cones inside. And the outer cone just kind of is there to detect the player's in that range. If it is, it generates a new Bezier curve that goes off the original path and then returns to it. So basically, if it detects the player, it can veer off its planned route, look for the player. If it doesn't find them or the player escapes from that area, it returns back to its normal path. There's nothing really additional to the complexity of the game on this. It's very simple, it's quick, it's small, and it's a quick proof of concept for sort of an exploration slash sneaking game. You don't need to make your games hugely large and full of content to be interesting. Kind of pick the things that you want to dig into and lean into. Fun note, before we actually cut out the uppercut, I built in the ability to convert the Bezier flight path to a physics path when you hit it. So that part actually works. We just didn't get the actual uppercut from the character model in. So you will have half-finished features in all of your games, except that now. For the environment itself, a lot of it is just simple reused elements due to the fun lighting setup that we used. Since it was a scary game, we basically had a lot of really dim lit textures and a lot of bloom in our lights. So in this version, not asset store, close tab. Shaded. There is my regular. These all change. There we go. I'm not finding the mode I'm looking for. Anyways. So, a lot of these are just simple reused blocks that are kind of angled around to make the environment look more interesting. In our game, the character can't walk up those angled walls as part of the character controller. And that wasn't, an accident. We knew we didn't want them to be able to run up over those sides. And so we just kind of used those as obstacles for the player to move around. For the pipes, there's about 3 different pipes that are just kind of stretched and skewed. Were built sort of in a bent I-frame setup. And those are just kind of adding decor and decoration. They didn't really actually get into any place the player walked. It was largely decoration. So simple little greebles or elements to break up the repetitive visual use of the landscape can help make the game look a little bit more interesting. Any questions on that? Does anyone know the story of where the word greebles comes from? Okay, it comes from Tunisian customs. When filming Star Wars, the first one, Tunisian customs required the production company to basically label every box that was coming imported. And there was a box of styrofoam blocks and other weird sort of things they would spray paint for little decorative elements in the Star Wars set. And so someone, and some people credit to George Lucas himself, just wrote greebles on the box. And then that became the term for the industry. So, but you can add these little elements that just make the game look a little bit more interesting. For the art style of this, again, we're not using a lot of high detail, stuff in the textures. It's very simple, and so you can get a lot of good looks just from picking an art style that stands out. Realistic art styles themselves take a long time to get right, and the reality is, realism has a really short half-life in games. If you want to go for realism, great, that's awesome. Just know that you're going to come back to it in a couple years and go, that could be so much better. So style-wise is going to have a much more longer-lasting appeal for the stuff that you build. That being said, it's a game you build in a weekend. Don't feel like it's going to be a grand masterpiece, because it's probably not going to be. And that's okay. It's not meant to be. Your main gameplay loop for a lot of game jam games should really be zeroing in around under 5 minutes. So you should be able to play through the whole game, in most of them, about 5 minutes or so. You can go a little bit longer, but if you're going longer, make sure that first 5 minutes is fun, because otherwise people don't want to keep playing. It's really important to make your players actually feel engaged with the game itself. So make it fun quickly, easily, and kind of go from there on that. Same thing for things like exposition in your game. It's a game you have, basically 48 hours to build. You're not going to get a lot of extra world building into your game that is explicitly told to the player. I remember one writer I worked with that was on the verge of tears because the 15-minute intro he wrote wasn't going to make it into the game, not on this one, but a different one, because we can't have the player wait 15 minutes before they play the 5-minute long game. So have your expectations realistic for what you're going to build and the players themselves. You may find some player that is hugely loving the idea that you're going for. That's awesome. But you're not always going to find that. Try and make a game that's fun for people that want to play it, and go from there. Who here has ever worked on a professional project where everything went smoothly and everything was well organized and coordinated, and it looked fine, and if you looked under the hood, it looked like, hey, this is really a great piece of machinery? I see one shaky-ish half hand. Real life is messy. We all know this. If you don't know this yet, or you don't fully appreciate it, you're in for a wild ride. Basically scenes or levels that you actually build your game in. On the left-hand side over here, we've got a tab for the hierarchy. This is basically listing all the actual game objects in the scene. It's just a long slew and giant slosh, things like slab, rock, and cube. It helps if you're organized with how you're placing this. But again, you got 48 hours, and you're going to throw things together. That's okay. As long as it makes sense to you at the end of the game, great. I would recommend not doing it the way we did it, just for the sake of making it easier. Grouping things under things like environment or interactable spaces, or important actual elements like enemies. Having those be in separate groups and categories is often helpful to kind of tease out what's going on. But that's okay if you don't do that. You're going to make mistakes, and sometimes mistakes aren't really that big of a mistake or an issue to begin with. So, on the right side over here, we have an inspector. The inspector is a contextual menu for Unity. A lot of game engines have a contextual menu, meaning what you ever have selected or highlighted is actually what shows up. I'm going to hit play again just so we can grab one of those Bezier flight paths. And so in here, we basically have a little thing that's showing us information about the individual loop. I removed all the public values on this, so we can't really see a lot on it. But what we can do is look at our drone. Get on there. 1, drone 2. And so here we can see our drone having additional information. The drone has its Bezier drone script that makes it fly along the flight path. It's got a rigid body, No, the rigid body right now is kinematic, which is related to like cinema. It basically means that it's not using physics to actually move it, even though it has a rigid body for physics that's used for that feature that I told you got cut for when you get uppercutted, and then it basically comes off the flight path and uses its current translated velocity. So you're not always going to clean things up at the end of it, because a lot of come together right at the last couple of minutes. Shouldn't, but many do. A lot of your actual assembly of your project really should happen during Saturday. So you're going to get together Friday night, do your ideation with your team. You're going to plan out a lot of details about what the game's going to be. Note, that's not a finalized version. The game will evolve as you build it. That's okay. But you want to identify what those core things are that are essential to your game. Identify like what the character is going to be. Identify sort of the art style you're going for. Identify any sort of huge technical risk that you have. And to give an example of that, not this game, but another game where we built for one of the Seattle VR hackathons. We made a game where you are basically the evil supervillain controlling a giant robotic octopus. And you actually had 8 robotic limbs you could control independently by moving your hands around. But it was a networked game. And so it worked across multiple, I think it was Vive headsets. We had a Oculus plug-in for it as well. We had a Google Glass viewer. And we had one other device, and I can't remember what it was. Basically, it was a networked game that allowed you to connect with multiple devices and had additional separate portals for viewers to kind of watch what was going on in this huge robotics battle. We knew the networking was going to be an issue. And so we had established that as, hey, this is a large technical issue that needs to be resolved. Otherwise, we have to change the whole plan for the game. And so that first night, after we had laid out what we were going to be working on the tasks, most of the team went home. And myself, Tiago, and Ryan stayed up basically till about 3 in the morning until we could get the bare fundamentals of our networking working for that solution. And that was not really a large, huge, momentous thing. I'm going to explain to you what it actually was. You're going to be like, that sounds ridiculous. And yes, but it was essential. Our test was making sure that one player could move a box. Another player could see that box move. And then that other player could move that same box, and then the original player could see it move it too. That was it. That was our huge technical test. Once we got that, we're like, great, we're good. We saved everything, pushed it, and went home. Because in the morning, we could come and tell the rest of the team the technical problem we had, it was solved. Any questions on that? Okay. A note on like figuring out what the actual technical ask is. Sometimes it's hard to tease out what is actually essential. I had some interns on a VR project a number of years ago where you could pour water into a bucket and have the bucket fill up. And one of the interns was a little bit slow in responding to testing that task. And I messaged him to figure out what was going on, because it had basically been a couple days since he was supposed to have that test report in. And his response to me was he didn't have a headset to test it. Like, well, that's not needed for testing the bucket pouring water. Just orient the bucket upside down over another bucket. And then he was able to confirm the test. So sometimes you think you need things that you don't necessarily need to figure things out. Think of the most basic, bare bones version of what you need. Any questions on that? Yes. It was. But yeah, yes. Sometimes you have something that works in a very narrow set of circumstances, and they don't always work when you scale things up, either in size or in numbers. So, but just be aware of that, hey, make sure you understand what you need it to happen. Yes?
Do you test it on local or
different locations. So,
Can you repeat the questions when they come in? Screen here.
I guess. Okay. I'll repeat the questions from now on. So, yeah. So, make sure that things are actually working in a bare minimum fashion before moving on to the next hurdle. If you realize that, hey, the game's not working or your core technical problem is not going to be solvable, be ready to pivot. We had another game jam where we were basically making sort of an MCS Escher type game in VR, where you go through like one walkway and then be on the wall in another space. And what we found is, to a third person viewer, that looks interesting. When you are the person walking through an MC Escher space, your personal reference is the ground is always down. So it's not as interesting in those kinds of spaces for you, the viewer. We were hoping to mitigate that with having it be networked and having multiple players so you can look around and see the person running around. That would have been more fun, except it just so happened that weekend we were using a Photon networking plugin, and Photon decided to have their services go down for an update without telling anyone. So we found that out basically early Saturday morning, like, okay, we need to pivot the entire game now. So be ready to pivot when those things happen. It's okay. You will still make something fun as long as you're able to recognize that, hey, this is a no-go situation, switch to something else. So any questions on that? Okay. For thinking of like the number of challenges and things you're going to have in your game, again, as I mentioned, you're probably going to get players there for about 5 minutes. If you're looking at like having different enemy types or different types of abilities, keep those small. Like 3 is a good, strong number, not just for its reasons of, hey, you can quickly try different things, like have an archer, have a melee character, and have some sort of immovable laser cannon. Just plan on keeping things small because you can make interesting gameplay elements with just a couple of handful of things that are arranged in different orders. You might have 2 melee characters in one part of the level, and then 2 melee characters of an archer, or have several archers in an area just by themselves. Those provide different ways for the player to engage the world. Any questions on that so far? Okay. It is a game jam. You're not going to get a lot of optimization and deeper level architecture into your game because those things take a long time. And unless your game is running terribly, you probably aren't going to have time to dig into it. And the skill sets on your team are going to be quite varied. You may not have someone on your team that has the knowledge of how to dig into that. That's okay. You're there to have fun. You're there to build a quick little experience and learn from it. For learning from it, you really want to limit what you're hoping to take out of a game jam. Pick one thing you really want to learn. One thing. If you got a breadth of skills already, pick something new. That's fantastic. Do the things that you're really good at or really quick at first so that they don't hold the rest of the team up, and then spend your time on learning that new thing. Don't expect to learn a whole system in a weekend. I have a friend of mine, I'm not going to say his name because I haven't asked him if I can share this particular part of his experience, but he was used to using Unreal. And so he decided he was going to use Unity for a game jam, and then figured he was going to try and learn Mechanim in a weekend. Mechanim is Unity's animation system / state machine. It's called an animation system, but it's actually a state machine with animation tied into it. You're not going to learn all of Mechanim in a weekend. He realized that basically a day into trying to figure it out without anyone helping him, and then asked me. It's like, okay, we're going to help tease out a little bit enough that he knows right now and figure out what we can do to get him going. But that's a larger project. If you have something like, hey, I want to make a character actually animate, and you've never done that before in Unity, that's a good simple thing to get working from there. If you're wanting to build a huge complex character controller that has it automatically trigger particle systems and callbacks for other types of effects, that's going to take a little bit longer. So remember, keep your scope small, both in terms of the game and your personal growth. You're going to get more out of it learning small little tidbits, because you're not going to get as frustrated. Any questions on that? Okay. Another fun note, it's not really a competition with Game Jam, isn't. You can ask other teams for help or advice, or just to see what's going on with them. People like to talk about what they're working on. They like to show you, and they like to be helpful. Don't feel like it's all on you. We are a very welcoming community in Seattle Indies. You want to actually kind of go out there, find out other people that are working on things that interest you, and you'll find that you share a lot of interests. Similarly, you may find that someone else doesn't know how to do something you know how to do, and you can help them out. So keep in mind, it is a game jam, and you don't have a lot of time. So don't spend your whole project asking one person how to do something over and over when they're trying to do something. Be a little respectful with your asks. Another friend of mine kind of set up a rule of like limit of 3 asks over the weekend of the same person. So, okay. Any questions? Cool. One quick note that's actually quite important. You'll spend a great deal of time trying to build your game and get all the pieces together. You should, at some point before the end of the game jam, actually try and build your game and play it. Might help. For those of us that are a little bit more experienced in this, we know that sometimes problems only occur in the build. But also, it helps to identify if there's any sort of huge hurdles that got overlooked. And I remember working on one project, and again, we had a number of actual professional game devs on the team, and we had a project manager. If you have a team larger than, say, 4, I strongly recommend that one of you is actually the manager for the team. Check in on everyone, make sure that things are getting done, things are on schedule, see if there's any problems that people need help with. You don't have to be a hugely technical manager, but just someone that's keeping an eye on the whole project itself and how people are doing. We had someone that took on the role of the project manager, but secretly didn't want to be the project manager and didn't tell anyone. And so there were a few things that fell through the cracks. We didn't find that till we hit play, and you start the game in a closet that's locked. And the feature for opening the door was broken. So the entire level and game that we had built, you couldn't get to. And we didn't find that out till the end. That's all right. But if you find yourself in a role that like, hey, this isn't a good fit, speak up. It's okay. And that was really kind of 2 failings. One was the lack of communication. Someone didn't really want to be responsible for checking on people. And the person that was building that feature didn't ask for help. And that happens. So it's a learning experience. Many of us have built games that just don't work. It's okay. You will make mistakes. You're there to have fun. So, cool. Any questions so far? Yes.
You mentioned like personal growth to keep scale small. Like don't try to learn an entire system overnight. What do you think is like good examples of things you want?
So the question was, in terms of personal growth, what are some good examples of keeping the scope small for that? Like I mentioned, like if you want to do like a simple feature, like if you want to learn how to make particle systems, don't envision like how all particle systems work. Think of it like you want to make a particle system that looks like fire or wants to look at a specific effect like a peony from a firework explosion. Because you're going to learn a lot about the whole system from trying to do that specific effect, even though that specific effect won't use everything in the particle systems that are available, but it will kind of narrow your focus. Similarly, if you want to make a character controllers are hugely complex pieces of code. Anyone that's ever built one knows you can spend a lot of time trying to perfect it. Think of it like you want a specific kind of feature in your character controller. Let's say you want to be able to have a character run towards steps and have them smoothly move up the steps. Okay, that's a feature that will teach you a lot to kind of build about character controllers and not having to go into all the little nuances of like dealing with acceleration rates and turning and whether or not you're having the character animations follow that. Focus on specific features that will teach you more about the systems involved. Does that answer your question? Great. So, Tim.
Online asks that they list what you're supposed to focus on Sunday. Friday ideation, Saturday coding,
Sunday is really throwing everything together and playing the game, making sure that it's working. Spoiler alert, many of you will still be throwing things together on Sunday. That's okay. But really, you're trying to make sure that the game itself is all there and working. And if things are broken on Sunday, ask the person responsible if they think it can reasonably be fixed quickly. If not, can it be cut? Because again, having the game be broken is worse than having a feature missing. It's important to kind of look at the game itself as its own entity. Yes, it may be missing that totally awesome feature, but the reality is anyone that's ever worked on a ship title can tell you there are lots of cool stuff that just never made it into the final build. And you know, your players will never know what they're missing. Yes.
I can think of it as an analogy to your in-editor build versus your executable that's built. Totally different things, but it's important to test both to make sure nothing's broken.
Yeah, and reiterating an earlier point, make sure you're testing the build itself. So your game in the editor it is basically your sort of staging area, and when you hit play, you've got all the duct tape and stuff on there still. When it's built on its own, it's supposed to run on its own, you may find some things are broken. Very rarely will you find things that are broken in the editor but not broken in the build. It does happen. It's really rare. So just note, you want to check the game itself separate from the editor. Any questions on that? And that's not just for Unity, that's really any sort of tool, platform, or game engine you're using. Any other questions?
Is there anything surprising that you learned from working with another person like at a channel? Or interesting?
So Tim's question, is there anything that surprised I learned from working with another person at a jam? I mean, I've learned lots of fun little techniques. I wasn't particularly surprised working with other people. It's kind of its own separate topic, partly because of my life experience. But you know, you will learn from people that have been living in different parts of the world. You will learn people that have different perspectives on topics. You'll learn different kinds of things that you weren't aware of in both your technical skills and also your social skills. It's very important to kind of stretch out the life experiences you have and work with other people. And honestly, you know, there is nothing harder than working with other people that don't want to work with you. And you don't want to be the person that is hard to work with. That can close a lot of doors for you in the future. So, yes.
A question along those lines. So the only times I've done game jams, it's always been people I already knew and worked with. Considering you've done 15-ish, are there any that you've done with people you didn't know prior? Do you have any tips for finding people for those who decide not to just use buddies that they
Yes, partly because when I started, I knew absolutely no one. My first game jam actually was 2013ish, I think. And I met a guy in the elevator that had an Oculus dev kit. It was not publicly available yet. Uh, and then I pitched a game, and he joined my team. And then we had someone else join our team that had a different version of the Oculus dev kit because there were multiple versions for the public release. And so we built a VR game way back before they were commercially available. They didn't have the haptic controllers then; it was the Xbox controller. But those guys, I had never met them before in my life. And like one of them, the guy I met in the elevator, Victor, I talked to him, back again in I think November. You're gonna meet people that you will know for a long time. And I actually had a group of friends, and we became friends through game jams. Core about 5 of us. That I think on my second game jam, we just kind of formed a team together, and then we had a great time. And then we kept going to game jams, but we didn't plan on working together. We just had similar interests, and so we kept joining the same teams. But we also were very active in that group to bring in new people. Every single time we worked together, we had lots of other people that had never worked with us before that we didn't know. Many of them were people that hadn't actually worked on game jams before. And some of them, like I remember we had done a game jam for AT&T, and that was the one where everything blew up, where we had the MC Escher game. And that one was a good learning experience for us. And then the next game jam we did, there was a 13-year-old kid, Avery, who approached us wanting to join the jam. And we had seen him at the AT&T game jam as well. He was on a different team, and they had like a simple little thing that was working that was nice. And we said, yeah, come aboard. And Avery's skills were comparable to the people that were working at Microsoft. And granted, he was an exceptional individual, but you're going to meet those people out there in the world. And Avery actually was another person that we'd repeatedly have join the same team. And, met his dad, talked to him, James, great guy. You're going to find people that come from all walks of life. So hang out with them, find people that you enjoy working with, and go from there. Any other questions? Yes.
Working with people from all walks of life, what are the biggest things you've learned regarding team communication and how to use what you've learned effectively?
I'm going to use an example from the giant. What was that, Ted? Go ahead and read out your question for me one more time. So.
What are the most important things you've learned regarding team communication?
Thank you. What are the most important things I've learned from communication in regards to teamwork and game jams? The example I'm going to use is from the Giant Octopus VR one. Note, Seattle VR had made a rule specifically because of past teams I had had. And this was another one of those where they changed rules because of what we did. For that team, we had 15 people on the actual team. And that was like skirting around because they had tried to limit it to 7 people on a team. And they had a reasonable argument for that. And it was that they wanted to make sure that everyone on a team felt like they were contributing. And that is actually a very good thing to try and emphasize. Everyone on your team should feel like they are actually contributing to it. But for that project, like I had leads. I was not trying to coordinate everyone myself. I basically had divided our 15 team in half. We had a team that was focused on the actual gameplay because there was the actual game elements of it. And we had the other half were focused on devices and networking. And so within those, basically had Ryan and Tiago were kind of leading our networking. But we had people that had certain strengths. Brent was on sort of our device and networking team, but he was really our Git master. He was focused on making sure that all of our source control was up to date and coordinated, and everyone was kind of going to him if they had a problem, and problems that occurred. And so, like, if you have people on your team that have strengths, rely on them. Make sure that they are able to actually be reached out to by the rest of the team. But I spent half my time, because I was the project manager on that team, going around and checking in with people. I would literally get up out of my station and I would go and talk to each people. What are you working on now? How are things going? Is everything going okay? Is there any problems you need help fixing? And some people didn't have problems at all, and others would occasionally have an issue. And we had a few people that had never worked on game jams before on that team. We had one guy, I think Matt, who had never written a script. And I spent like an hour with him on Saturday teaching him to write his first script, at which point he learned he didn't like programming, which is okay. And that's fine. And so you want to spend time with your team members and get to know them, know what their skills are. If you spend a little bit of time that first hour on Friday learning what people's skills are, that will make the product so much easier because you know who you can rely on for certain tasks, and you can know who's interested in learning something about a particular task. So talk to the people beforehand. What are their interests? What are their skills? What do they want to learn? Okay. Does that help you out?
Yeah, definitely.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Any other questions? Cool. All right. You've all been a great audience.
that was me. And I've only done one additional game jam since then. But I do have a lot of experience in Git, and so I will help you learn that, and I'll also be alluding to things from the other talks to help give this a little bit more texture. So given that you're asking the question how to use Git in a game jam, and it's not very different than using Git in another context, I'm just going to assume that you're pretty new, and you'll probably want to acquire a version of Git that's gonna work effectively for you. I highly recommend getting a graphical tool. At its core, Git is a command line tool, but you're going to get a lot more functionality out of a graphical tool. And despite being very much a command line guy in general, I use a graphical tool, the one on the left, when I develop. So I would recommend that you get Git GUI is pretty much if you're on Linux. Otherwise, you want GitHub Desktop, and once you have those, you'll basically be ready to access Git through them. So Git is a type of source control or version control, where you're basically managing the state of a project, and so there are a few concepts that you want to be aware of, and which I'll go over right now. The first very basic concept that's kind of at the core of what we mean with using Git and using this kind of version control is the idea of a commit. So let's say you're doing a project and you have a fun new idea for another feature that you're going to add. Your character's on screen, things are kind of working, but you want the character to do a dash or a jump. You're creating a new feature, and in doing so, you're changing the project. And then maybe you decide that you don't like the feature, or it didn't work. What's there is not working, and you just want to go back to where you were before. If you didn't save your project earlier, there's no way to go back easily. And if you save a lot, it actually becomes very difficult to manage all of the different files that you're using when you're saving. So this is the problem that version control is solving, and the way that it's done in Git is through commits. Basically, when you enter your Git, you're going to have something like I have on the left, where you have a main screen that's full of what's called a diff. It's basically what's changed from the last time you saved the project. And if you've ever had a text file and done track changes, that's basically exactly what a diff is. It's just going to show you everything that was removed, everything that was added, and allow you to see what's changed, and what is happening. What a commit is it's going to allow you to take that difference and say, okay, yes, I accept this difference, and now I want you to only start showing the differences that I've made on top of this. This set of differences is one thing that I'm kind of saving in a chain of differences, and when you use Git, you're able to basically move back and forth across the chain by checking out a single difference. So on the top, your differences start out basically just as differences in the project that are unstaged. And when you want to make a difference concrete, you move it to a staged area. You can basically you want to put together some changes that are the changes you want to save. Create a descriptive description that says what you're changing and maybe highlights some aspects of it. If you've added a jump, you can say what you've added, explain that, and then once you're done, you can commit the differences that you've staged, and then those differences are saved, and you can go back to them later, and you'll only have the differences that are remaining in your project, like being recorded by your version control. So that's kind of a lot to take in. It'll probably take a little bit of an adjustment when you open up the application and see it in action, but that's actually more or less the main thing that you're going to have to get used to using Git. This is really the core of it, and everything else that comes after this are kind of there are a couple other layers of things that we have to worry about, but this is the most important thing. As long as you commit your work, you can go back to it, you can restore the state of your project that you had earlier and you liked, and you're going to be that much better off from using version control, as opposed to saving a lot of different files or just having to try to go back manually and edit backwards, which can be very difficult. All right. So one of the higher level concepts that I'm going to introduce to you is branches. So basically, once you have this version control, what you can do is you can have a commit, and then you can basically make different copies of a project and put different things on top of that. So if you have a working project and you want to work on a running feature, and someone else in the group wants to like add a music that tracks when you move or something like that, you can both take the project from the specific commit where it's working, and then each add your own separate commits in different states, which are called branches, to the project. And this can get pretty complicated because you can end up with a lot of different versions of the project that end up, kind of merging back and forth between each other. The way that you take the way that you take these different versions and combine them is called merge. And that's something that there's a lot of subtlety. It's kind of beyond the scope talking too long about merging different versions of the project. But what you should know here is that basically you can maintain multiple different versions of the project that are built in different ways in their own branches. So you could have a project that has a new feature. Each one could have its own separate branch. Each feature could have its own separate branch. You can have a project that has, like all of the sound done. You could have a separate branch for just testing, like something that you're going to be, giving to people who are wanting to test the project. And you're going to have maybe a project that represents the whole game. By default, depending on your settings, when you start a repository, which is the thing that Git is managing, which I should have gone over earlier, I'm sorry. But like you're going to have a main or master branch, and that's kind of the one that you're going to be like that would usually be your entire game, basically, what you're going to end up submitting for the jam. Do you have any questions? I feel like I've gone over a lot. Yeah.
So I am definitely more than familiar with Git, and so
Okay.
I feel like this is a
Yeah,
sideways bit
I
of
wasn't.
Audience of like, do they know anything about Git, or do they need to know specifically how to use Git for a game jam?
Right. I'm just about to get to Git for specifically game jams in the next couple of slides.
Okay, then I'll wait for a related question on that line.
Okay. All right, so the last concept, remotes. Usually, I mean, if you're using a GitHub desktop, you'll have GitHub. But basically, the thing you need to know is that when you use this tool, it doesn't necessarily, just because you've committed something, it doesn't necessarily get back to your team. You have to make sure to push the commits that you've made and pull in the commits from your teammates. Otherwise, you're not truly synced. So it's not going to automatically sync for you. At least the last time I used GitHub Desktop. But yeah, like as a tool, you're working just locally, and you basically have to check and make sure that you're looking at what other people are committing in your project by fetching their changes as you go. So just remember to do that. That's probably the most important thing to know about remotes. And yeah, so now if you've kind of gotten this, you can have a workflow. So this would be kind of a possible workflow where you have your main or master on the top. You have kind of feature-rich branches centered around certain concepts, maybe audio or whatever kind of groups pan out in your team. You have maybe a lot of different feature branches under that, and maybe just individual personal experiment branches under that. And when you want to build your project, it's really great because all of your smaller branches can kind of merge up into these larger branches and then make a very powerful project. One thing I would say is if you use this, just try not to corrupt the vision of your teammates and run away with the project by trying to control the main branch. That's apart from just not being a way to make a good game, it's not very nice. But that's kind of what I would recommend. This can take a little bit of the heavy lifting away from team management, because if groups in the team have their own branches that they keep updated, there's not as much of a necessity to check in with them. You'll still need to coordinate and know your teammates' skills, but you won't have to be asking like, what's the status, as long as they've kept it updated, because it will be right there, checked in to the relevant branch. All right, so actually, did you have a question before we move on?
It's kind of more related to the point of team dynamics, right? In the same way that you have this partly toward an audience of maybe you've never touched it, and partly toward people who have, knowing that you may end up on a team like that, what is a good way of organizing it for the people who don't know about Git? Like, is it making one person be the designated Git person? Is it having certain workflows set up and just making sure they all know what to do beforehand? And then separating it out for something like the content version system for art, so that way people aren't checking art into Git versus code. So wondering, like, if there is a reason to use this, how do you go ahead and make sure that everyone's on board instead of having the terrible merge conflicts, which you were about to go into?
Well, you're going to have those anyway, I think. But okay. In any case, so for people who are new, I would recommend just hammering down on two different points. One is just keep updated, like push and pull regularly, and that will help keep everyone on the same page. And the other one is be on the right branch. So you're talking about if people are not pushing to the correct location. As long as you make a branch for them that they can push to, that's going to solve that problem. And it might have to be a personal branch for just them that then gets merged into the team that they're on by someone who knows more about Git, or it might be like something else. But as long as you make a branch for them to use and they know what branch that is and they keep it updated, you know where they are in the project, and someone who's a little bit more familiar can deal with stuff like merging and more of the complicated stuff. One thing I would make sure to for someone who's very new, it can be okay, so when you're working on very big projects, it's often really nice to have a very specific commits that address just one thing and are sort of atomic, so you can go backwards and forwards at will. But that's not a requirement for using version control, and that can be difficult. So if you're having trouble figuring out what to put into a commit, don't make a decision and just commit everything. As long as it's working and good, you can commit as you go. That could make rewinding later a little bit more difficult, but it's much better than not committing. So yeah.
So I've been on teams where some members didn't have any version control skills, and what we've done is we have simply had them share stuff with the people who did, because for a 1 day or a 2 day project, for them to get caught up in something that they now have to spend a half an hour on fixing or be frustrated about wasn't the right solution. So we just had them share this with the people who did have the skills and had the tools already and knew how to use the tools, and had them focus on being great contributors for the stuff that they want.
That can work, but I mean, as long as they can grasp this interface and you give them a personal branch, this can also work as well. So it really depends on what you want to do. If someone just says no, I don't want to deal with any of this, that's a great solution. You don't give them any of that, and you're like, okay, I'll check your changes in. You can just give your stuff to me and I'll make sure it gets in. That means a little bit more work for the people who know Git. If everyone is ready and willing to embrace this, or most people are, for everyone who is, you can you get to this interface, just start checking in everything you have to a branch that's maybe just yours, a personal branch that shows where you are in the application. Yeah.
So, with producing art, like, do you guys typically just check it into Git, and hope that it just works, or do you use a second version control for art, or you just don't version control art in game jams?
I know for the team that I worked on, it was just checked into the normal version control. It's a little different for art, just because making commits that are atomic is not really possible. So it's usually just the latest version that's relevant.
See, the thing that I have with Git is like it just pushes it back because my art is too big, and it says I can't do it. So then I need to install Git LFS.
Yes.
So that's why I'm asking, what do you guys do?
Git LFS will work. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's not, since I don't actually do very much art, that's not something I thought of including this talk. But absolutely, if you're dealing with large file types, Git LFS will deal with them, and you will probably need some technical expertise to figure out exactly how to get that onto your machine. But that's something that it's a problem that can be solved with a little bit of a technical experience. It's really good to have someone who is experienced with Git on the team to kind of solve those technical issues, and you'll want everyone on the team to know who that is, so they know who they can go to help, for help. I'm not saying that there's no technical learning curve, but if you can get everyone onboarded to Git, you can potentially have a smooth workflow, a very smooth workflow, I think. All right. So, yeah, I mean, what's the cost? I mean, you're just letting everyone determine what the application does, and it all flows up perfectly, and everyone just gets a final product. Unfortunately, there is a cost to the magic of Git, and that is merge conflicts, which basically happen when two different branches, or two different branches have edited the same thing in two different ways, and then and they can't. The Git tool can't automatically tell you which which change is more authoritative or more recent. So in order to resolve these, you'll actually have to go into the file itself and have someone who knows about what's happening choose what is actually going to happen. So you can see here's an example from GitHub Desktop, and the you have a lot of kind of left pointing arrows, and then you have the name of one commit state, and then you'll have some lines in your file, and then you'll have a lot of equal signs, and that's to show that that's the end of what's from the first file, and then you'll have whatever's in the second file in the same place from the second branch, and then you'll have a lot of rightwards facing arrows. So taking what's between those arrows and combining it into the version that's the most correct, often that will just mean deleting the one that's not the latest and greatest. Sometimes that would mean kind of combining them in a way that's not as intuitive, and hopefully your team is communicating well enough that this is not a sign that you've gotten some wires crossed. You absolutely still have to communicate as a team, know what you're building, and know what people are working on separate from Git. That's still important. So Git will not solve that problem for you, but it will make kind of propagating the information of what everyone's working on and collecting it all together and making sure you don't lose your work a lot easier. All right, so yeah, I mean, that's the presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I started my own game company a while ago, and I'm actually devoting this year to putting out as the games that I can, and seeing if that can be sustainable. So if you're interested, you can follow my company on Blue Sky, and I'm planning to release my first game, which is a chess version with loop-based time travel by the end of Q1 this year. But now I'll open the floor for questions. Does anyone have any questions about anything that I talked about? Okay, yeah.
So as someone who uses Git but is still maybe a little unclear on its the specificities of how it works, do you have a preferred order of operations when using Git? Try to commit something, or
as someone who uses Git, what's the order of operations in which you might commit things? All right, so remember, if you're new to Git, you can just throw everything together in a commit. That's better than not committing. What I tend to like to do for an order of operations in actually getting these things that I've changed. Oh, yes, that's right. The first step is actually to pull, to make sure that your state, if you're working on a branch that other people are using, to make sure that your state is the same as the state that the whole team is using. And that can help prevent you from having to do merges that are unnecessary. The next thing is any bug or small fixes, just getting those out of the way, and then putting any features into their own separate commits. So that would be kind of the order that I try to reduce a large diff from what I had been working on. Generally, try for a game jam. You really do want to commit like what you have pretty reliably and without generating a really big diff that you have to work through and put into several separate commits. So yeah, I would stress just keeping everyone updated on what you're doing. Any other questions? Yeah.
You can kind of quarantine information, but if you like to take certain parts of the code base and say this can't be interacted with by anybody right now. Do you recommend doing that at all for a game jam? Or would you not do any of that? Lock down parts of the code so nobody can change?
I would definitely not do that. Kind of part of the thing that you're hopefully doing by separating this out into branches is that you're making sure that the different branches that you have are interacting with different parts of the code base, so that you don't have conflicts when you try to put things together. Yeah, so locking people out of specific parts is not something I would necessarily do. What I would say is that you might want to have, if you have your kind of three subsources of truth where you're working on kind of different aspects of the project, those might be associated only with certain parts of the code. And if there are changes to other parts of the code, you may need to check them into a different one of those branches. So if you associate those kind of slightly downstream branches that you're working on with specific areas and aspects of the code, that can be a very good way of effectively locking people out from editing different parts of the code base if that doesn't, if that needs to happen. Occasionally you might have changes that you just don't want to check in. Maybe you don't like the intro music and you change the file or something to mute it, and so if that's the case, you probably don't want to check that in anywhere. But assuming that people do want to share their changes, they'll need to be able to share them somewhere. They should have the flexibility to do that. So if you have separate branches with a clearly defined role, so that everyone knows kind of where their changes are going to go, that can help do that. And that's kind of, I feel like we're getting more into requiring a little bit more technical knowledge in order to do that. So maybe this is where you actually have most of the people in the project step back and start to have the people who are more familiar with Git and more familiar with version control deal with this kind of this kind of problem. Yeah.
Actually, there's a third one that I've been using more. Actually, I've just been using Cloud Code, and I've asked Cloud Code to do my pull requests and to basically do a ton of interactions with Git, and it worked actually pretty well.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as pull requests, that's more advanced than you probably want to go for a game jam. But yeah, keep in mind that your Git repository is you have Git in basically the same folder where your project is, and it's just managing the files there. So it's important not to get too bogged down in the details as you go through this. Yes, there's a lot of complexity that you can have, but also the basic workflow, just very simple. Commit what you have, push it to a branch that's the correct branch, and have someone who's familiar with Git kind of help you determine that, and then merge all your branches together to make your final product. And despite how complicated it could be, it usually isn't. That's kind of the key. It usually, hopefully, isn't, and ideally you have someone on your team who is more familiar with Git who can help. And in the worst case, you're basically piecing through these files, and that's something that can be done.
Yeah. What have been some engine-specific issues you might have encountered using Git?
Engine-specific issues with Git. So in Unity, they have there's like I think this also is a thing in Godot. There's basically like ID numbers that can differ from machine to machine that are checked into a certain file. In the Unity application actually has the ability to generate those IDs again. So when there are conflicts in that area, the solution when I worked on it was just to delete those areas and have the application regenerate itself for a new non-conflicting ID.
That happens when the assay gets pushed, but not the meta file. And then on different computers, they generate the meta file for it. And so then there's a conflict.
Apparently that happens when the asset, but not the meta file, gets pushed.
Except for it knows what the asset is by that ID. So you can match across your project.
I did also want to note some issues I've had regarding Unity and Git is saving the same scene files. Those can get really problematic really fast if multiple people are working in the same scene. And so the workaround I've learned is to put everything in your scene into a prefab. And when you make changes in that scene, you just overwrite prefab. So there's no, so not only are there fewer issues, you can also clearly see what's changed in the scene.
The recommendation is to be using prefabs when you develop with Unity to make sure that changes outside the prefabs are less sweeping, and I definitely agree that that's a good way to do things.
I've also tended to have a good experience game jamming with everyone having their own little playground, like scene that they'll pick up and test their stuff in, and then they can bring it into the main scene at a time that is coordinated with the team.
Yeah, and the comment is if everyone has their different playground scenes that they can then take and combine into the main scene, that's also a good way to do it. That would be a great use case for these kind of personal branches that you're merging together.
You can also have more than one scene loaded at a time, but that's a more advanced workflow.
Having more than one scene loaded at a time is a more advanced workflow. Just repeating things for whoever's online. All right, were there any more questions? Oh, okay. Very quiet and cautious applause. All right, thank you.
about designing for game jams. Game jams, sorry if I look at my phone a lot, all my notes are on here. So game jams are the most fun and some of the most stressful development times you'll have in game development. You're tired, you're excited, you're overworked, you haven't slept, and you're making big decisions as fast as you can. This isn't about making your dream game. It's about making something that works within 48 hours and hopefully still liking the people you made it with at the end. A little bit about me. I've been the experience design director at Electronic Arts for the last 6 years, worked with Battlefield 6, Battlefield 2042, Star Wars Rise to Power. I was the head of UX and UI for Battleverse Champions at Tenacious Entertainment, and worked on scholastic educational games, K through 12, math and English vocabulary. Also was senior UX game designer at Minecraft Education and Beyond Site, and worked on Google Maps. I went here to DigiPen. I have a BA in game design. I also have a master's in UX design from MICA, and I'm weeks away from finishing my PhD in instructional design. So what makes game jams different? Game jams break a lot of the rules we're used to in schools or studio work. You don't have time to explore every idea. You don't have time to wait for consensus. And you definitely don't have time to make everything perfect. A game jam that exists is always better than a perfect game that never ships. That mindset is one of the most important ones when doing game jams. So the mindset. What is the game jam mindset? One of the hardest things in game jams is letting go of your big, great ideas. Constraints actually help you design faster. They give you the guardrails with what you need to design within. I know that was way too many adverbs, but that's fine. Simple mechanics are easier to test, easier to explain, and easier to finish. If you can't explain your game in one clear sentence, it's probably too big for a game jam, and you also are probably not aligned with your teammates. And although that's okay, some ideas are usually better to turn into larger games, and some are meant for game jams. So this is my kind of diagram I made. Limit creates focus. And like I said, constraints are your design tool. A lot of times when you're reaching as a designer, people tell you like, oh, what's it like working within a short time scope or within short resources? This actually is a tool, because as long as you have a box to design with, then you can take that and say, this is what I need to move forward. And you can look within your sandbox instead of outside of it. And like I said, small ideas win. If you don't know the phrase KISS, it means keep it simple, stupid. And that's the most important things of the game jam. Start with one mechanic, make sure it's clear, and then build on top of it. But you do not want to try and put in multiple things at once and try to overcomplicate your design. And like I said, done beats perfect in a game jam. So this is your, oh wait, this one, I forgot, too many buttons. This is your 48-hour design loop. First, align, decide, build, test, cut, and ship. This loop is the one thing I really want you to walk away with when you're thinking of how to design, because it's what keeps the game jam teams from over-investing too early. So I'm going to give you a quick example. Imagine you have a 4-person game jam team. They agree they're making a puzzle game. Cool, great. But you reached your first step of alignment. Awesome. But the mistake that a lot of people make is now they think they've reached alignment, so they go off and build. That's only your first stage. If you build all into separate directions, you're not aligning each phase, then you really haven't done that. Instead, the loop forces constant decision making. Someone has to decide what the puzzle actually is. Someone has to decide when it's playable to test enough. And someone has to decide what gets cut. That's the difference between using this loop and not using this loop. Without the loop, the team spends 6 hours building systems, menus, animation, extra mechanics before anyone even plays. You don't even know if what you've done is viable or if you've just wasted your time. And obviously in a 48-hour time period, you have no time to waste. With the loop, the team sets a tripwire. They say in 2 hours, we must be able to play something, even if it's bad, even if it's ugly. The simplest possible version of the game, gray boxes, text on screen, no art, just playable. Maybe it's boring, but that's okay, because now you know why it's boring, and you can work on that, and you can build off that. That test tells them what to cut. Maybe the puzzle needs clearer feedback. Maybe the mechanic needs to be faster. Maybe an entire feature just doesn't belong. But then you loop again, align on change, decide quickly, build just enough, test early, and cut hard. Design in a jam is a phase at the beginning. It's this loop over and over again until you ship. If you remember nothing else, remember if you can't play your game yet, you're investing too much time. So choosing game safe ideas. When teams really struggle, it's because the idea was too risky for the time they had. Game jam safe ideas focus on one core interaction and one clear goal. Things like multiplayer, big narrative systems, or unfamiliar tools aren't bad. They're just risky when you only have 48 hours to learn them. Pick the smallest idea that you find exciting, and that's what you should run with. You can always polish later if you have time. So if a team of 4 sits down and their first idea is, let's build a narrative co-op driven RPG. Awesome, that sounds great on paper, but in a jam, that's obviously a clear trap. Why it's bad: narrative heavy, multiplayer, content explosion, and no single player core early to try out and test. Instead, you ask, what's the smallest playable version of this idea? Cut multiplayer, cut branching dialogue. Now your idea just becomes a single player game where you make one meaningful choice under pressure, and the world reacts immediately. Same emotion, radically safer scope, and that's the difference between a game jam that dies on Saturday or ships on Sunday. Cutting scope is not failure, it's good design. And I want to say that so many times. Failure in design is awesome. I know that, I turned this off. I ruined everything. Oh, I figured it out. And that's what we call usability testing. Cut features that don't serve the core loop. When you have that, fake things when you need to. And be kind when ideas get cut. Not now is better than no, right? Or maybe we save that for a larger idea is better than no. A lot of things are better than no in those when you're working in collaborative efforts. Success at game jams isn't about winning awards. It's shipping something playable, learning a ton, and still wanting to work with your teammates again. Make something small, make it playable, and make it together. Okay, but what if you can't agree on idea? Pick the smallest idea that everyone can commit to for 4 hours. Come back and see where you are and then vote on those ideas. What if the game isn't fun? Well, simplify the core mechanic until it's clear and then test again. What if you have feature creep? If it doesn't serve the core loop, cut it. And then designer versus programmer conflict, decide once, write it down, and then keep that and move forward. Honestly, if you are a designer and you find yourself in conflict with programmers, number one way to clear it up is documentation. If you guys can your brains work differently. That's why you do different things. If you can write it down and understand and align on that, then you will have that moving forward. And so closing thoughts I have here. When you're stuck at 2 a.m., come back to these 3 things. What is our loop? What can we cut? And can someone play this right now? So it's make something small, make it playable, and make it together. Your first idea is probably too big, and that's okay. And you'll learn more in 48 hours than you could possibly expect. Oh yeah, this one. And thank you. I'm happy to take questions. I know I probably went through that really fast.
What would you say are the best guidelines for coming up with for taking more complex ideas and basically
narrowing it down?
Guidelines for scope limiting your initial ideas so you don't just go off.
I think if you have this big idea that you think this is the one, keep asking yourself what is fun about that idea until you get to what your core mechanic is. And then that's what you start. You bend a complete cycle of a playable core mechanic and you build off of that instead of trying to start with a larger scope. So you start with something small and build up instead of starting with something like, oh, but this could be this cool, amazing idea, which it probably definitely could be, but not for 48 hours. Yeah.
I love your design, try, iterate, and cut. That kind of stuff is great. One thing I've learned is, or I've done once, is I built one core functionality, but I had someone else go off on their own branch, and if they could have a stretch goal to do that, let them succeed or fail, but then still have the main core, what everyone else is working on, and focus on that. So that big function wasn't ever made, that was cut.
I think that's a great way to handle it, especially in game jams, because if you have a working core mechanic, you can do various things and try with that. You've reached the next stage of iteration then to see, okay, what can we do to more gamify this core mechanic? Yeah.
With mechanics and features, whichever you name them, I was wondering if one feature or part of scope would count as like one thing that requires this sort of code and art assets and so on. Uh, yeah, would like a piece of a feature or like a single feature sort of be like that, at least in a game jam context.
I think that's a little bit challenging for me to answer, not being a coder. But I think that when you start with your core mechanic, what it is like the one thing that people are doing each time that makes it fun, right? So, in Fruit Ninja, it's slashing fruits. Like that's it. It's not everything else that comes. It's just that one slash, that one finger slash. So what is the one thing that you want to drive and build around? And I think if you think about it as like, okay, like Italian food, right? It has the same 6 ingredients. Sorry if you're Italian and I'm offending you, but it has the same 6 ingredients served multiple different ways. But you could almost say like the core of that is a tomato, right? So you have your tomato and everything, and you're reusing this tomato in multiple different ways to make it interesting. In the same way you want to approach your core mechanic as your tomato. I hope that answered your question.
From a design standpoint, especially if you're trying to put things you make on a portfolio, documentation is very important. In a game jam setting, the iteration and design process is very rapid. So do you maybe have tips on how to like keep documenting?
I do.
Have material?
Yes. First thing, game jam, you're totally right. It's not the time where you're doing the after each feature, you're going through and saying this, but you say just save everything. Even if you think it's a shit idea, save it. Don't like erase it and go to the next one. Save it as a copy and go to the next one. And then you can look back after the game jam and write your postmortem and say, this is the journey we took. And also you can start at the beginning and say, this was our problem. These were the risks we faced along the way. You can start with all that stuff in the beginning. In fact, in portfolio, that's my number one recommendation is to start with that and then say, this is the journey we took. And the best thing about portfolios, and I think anyone who's like done professional stuff will agree with this, that a failure is not a bad portfolio piece as long as you can explain why it was a failure. And so it's the journey, it's talking the storyline that's going to matter for your portfolio. And as long as you're saving along the way, then you should easily be able to look back the weekend after and say, this was the story we took, this is the journey we got here. Here's this iteration. We thought it flopped for these reasons, so we tried this. That's the kind of stuff that designers are going to want to hear when they're interviewing you and see in your portfolio.
Mm-hmm. Just one more. I think I got a better idea of what I meant with regards to features and mechanics and all that. For instance, if we're looking at Super Mario Bros., one feature could be just the act of moving left and right. The other could be jumping. Both of those have their own logic and would also need to mesh well with each other in order to function properly. And so let's say if things are really tight, let's say we would have to say remove either the moving left and right or the jump.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could say the jumping is your mechanic. You could build an entire game just around jumping. You could build an entire game just around moving. That's kind of what puzzle platforms were for a long time, right? So you can say, this is all I have. So what can I do with this? And that's kind of you're building, that's your base you've made. And now you're kind of adding what you can within scope, you know? Yeah.
Concerning like by what time you should decide on the mechanic you proceed with, or you should take it all to the trash and start over, try something new, or like do you have any timelines for that kind of testing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it largely depends on who you have on your team too, right? Honestly, the more devs you have, the more you can test, which is great. But also, I think 4 hours is a roughly good time period. If you think about you've given 4 hours into something and it's still not right, it's definitely time to move on to something in 48 hours.
And you mentioned in controlling for like a minimum playable prototype to get something that works. Don't worry about architecting it pretty. I've heard from a lot of other teams that there are artists or musicians who will end up spending the first day just doing nothing. How do you balance getting a prototype playable that doesn't worry about aesthetics or art, like making sure people have a role
Yeah.
and still play in that process?
I think that in that case, if you have art or music or something that are on your game jam team that early, they should be included in the conversations. If nothing, they will contribute ideas that are very viable, no matter what their craft is, right? You will contribute ideas that matter and help. Two, they can start exploring things, right? You might not have we don't have official work, but you roughly understand what we're building, right? You're seeing us create something. They can start messing around and exploring what they can do to contribute in that as well, which is why it's important to include them. Yeah.
I imagine they could probably spend that first moment of ideation for putting just the base white box playable build up, making concept art or concept sounds and tracks.
Yeah, maybe a core loop, a basic loop for the back of some. In the same way that we're looking for a core mechanic, I'm sure that there's some basic loop that's this is our MVP of sound we can have. Not being a sound designer myself, but some noise is more than a lot of people get in their game jams, right?
Just strikes me that in a 48-hour period, if anybody's not doing something, then it's probably been a failure of managing time and keeping people on task. Because I've heard from a lot of people that they will spend a day not contributing to the project, and I have to question what was the structure of your project that you thought 48 hours and then you could take 12 of it.
Yeah. I actually think this is a problem that exists in all game development, right? Is that we have this kind of lean, hybrid, agile process that does cause a lot of designers and creatives to kind of be later on the end. Including people early in the conversation always works better, even in larger scale conversations. Even if it's just someone giving their opinion or it's something saying oh, well, I see an opportunity of how I can approach this problem here. So I think as long as, even if they think, what am I going to do right now? Still bring them in. I'm sure that they'll contribute something, And if they're not, maybe challenge that. And maybe, while you're building something, have them test it. Be like, hey, can you put this controller in your hand? I've been fucking around with it for 3 hours. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And have your artists sit next to the designers, because then there may be moments where the designer's trying to emphasize something, trying to tweak something, and throw something that art just make a quick little change to. And then also early on, identifying certain things like key interaction points. It's helpful for the artists to know, hey, doorknobs are this high up off the floor.
Yeah.
It gives them not only cues for how to adjust things, also knows what to highlight.
And there's some of that end game polish stuff that maybe doesn't happen in game jams usually that people could do earlier, like making your menu or finding a cool font, small things like that. They add a lot in the game jam time period. I think there was another question over here. Yeah.
This is a more general question about game jam.
Yeah.
But how might you go about balancing workflow if you or other teammates have work or other obligations that they need to see during the duration of the game?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And my answer for it is totally shit. Are you ready? Probably don't sign up for a 48-hour game jam if you don't have 48 hours to dedicate to it. I know that's a really gnarly answer, and it's not how I approach regular work life experience. I firmly believe in people are tired, go home, come back when you're ready. But I don't think that's not what a game jam is, right? It's sort of the sport of it. It's sort of like being a competitive eater. You're not going to go if you already went to a all-you-can-eat buffet right beforehand and then competed. Maybe you are. I don't know competitive eaters, but maybe they do that. But the point is it's a commitment, and it's a very short commitment, but a really intense one. But with that being said, emergencies happen, things happen, and if that happens, then if you think that that's someone that you could happen to, please be on a team, right? Communicate with your team, talk to your team. Everyone wants to support you and to finish it, so just make sure you're being collaborative in that effort. You know, like, of course, shit happens. We're human, and life sucks. But yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah, I want to add my 2 cents to this. I think what's helped me before is where at the beginning of a jam, everybody talks about how many hours they would be able to contribute in case they have other stuff they have to deal with. So being transparent in terms of how much time you can give
Yeah.
is going to help a lot.
Transparent and honest with yourself. That's the other one, right? It's like, if you know you can't commit more than that, don't tell people that you can, like, what you were hoping to commit. Undersell, over deliver. That's going to save you your whole life. Undersell, over deliver. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you have advice for people, like how they should talk to a designer to get like good results? I guess, like if they're not a designer, what are things they can like tell you?
Yes.
They want to like tell them to get the fun.
I think one thing that's, designers are dreamers. We can't help it, right? First thing is, a designer will ask you a lot of questions, and it can seem like they're challenging what you're saying. And I do think that's the first pill to swallow with designers. They will ask you a lot of dumb questions, but we have to. It's just how it works. And you just have to be a little bit tolerant of that. The second part of it is that because they're dreamers, you have to sit down and ask them questions back. So when you see that they're going off the rails, ask them how that's going to work. You know, ask them specifics. You've probably, as engineers, you've probably already seen the endpoint of why it doesn't work, but you have to get the designer to see it. So then you say, okay, I can see this isn't going to work because we're gone way out of scope and we don't have the technical capability. So you say, what are you thinking here? And they say, well, I'm thinking you can jump and then double jump and then twirl. And you're like, okay, this is about how long that's going to take for me to finish that. Is that important to what we're building in the final part? You know, and they'll be like, oh shit, no, it just looks cool. You know, so it is about like being, they don't know what they don't know. We have no concept of how long our ideas take us. We have no concept of how challenging our ideas are. So just being upfront and being realistic about, like, it is challenging. That is crazy, you know, without calling them crazy. Well, you can call them a little crazy. Yeah.
I want to add, as a designer, because we are dreamers, we can sometimes hold on to our visions a little tightly. We can be stubborn about things. Please bear with us. Please keep challenging us, and please don't take it personally if we are a little bit too stubborn with letting go of some things, because these are our babies. Killing babies is very hard for us, but we will do it for the benefit of the team. At least the good designers will.
I will also add a lesson to designers on that, which is that you might think they're your babies, but they're not. And that is very, very important. As a cook, you're going to burn things, right? Start again, do it again. You know, if you're a mathematician, you're not like, I solved that, I'm going to frame that freaking problem. I nailed it. I'm not saying, like, I'm a creative too. Of course, I know that we grow attached to it, but it is very important to realize that this is our craft in here, and the part that should inspire you is the iterative journey. It is the iteration. It is the learning, because you will apply that in all things moving forward, and you will learn to break things. I still struggle breaking away from my ideas. I'm not going to pretend like it's the easiest thing in the world to just be like, fuck my ideas. They were bad anyways. Go to this idea, because it's definitely not. It's very, very challenging, but it is important to also be willing to adapt and grow and let go of things. And, you know, just as coders have to mark out some of their code, or we have to do the same thing, you know? Any other questions? Cool. So you guys know everything now. Yeah. Just kidding. I'm just